right, we're here at my tiny worm bin, and we have had some issues this week in this worm bin. So 2 days ago, I went in here to kind of check on it, and I was going to do a video, and what I found was some dried out baby worms on the surface of this newspaper and a couple more on the sides. And my thought was that maybe this bin is reaching its carrying capacity, so they were kind of getting out of the way because there's just too many worms. But then I looked on the surface and I could see some mites, and the surface looked like lots of castings, so I thought maybe they didn't have a lot of food, so I should have gotten in here earlier. So what I did to try and get rid of the mites was I put some bread, and you can see I have some on here right now. And then I came back about 12 hours later, meant to do it a little bit earlier, but I pulled back the bread and there were worms through the bread as well as a lot of mites. And right up here on this edge, there was about 5 or 6 adult worms kind of in a little tiny worm ball. So it was almost to me like they came to the bread and then the mites got on them and they didn't like it and they almost tried to flee. So this is kind of an advanced issue for a worm bin. When you just start a worm bin, you're not going to get a ton of mites like you are going to see in this bin. You might have a few mites and worry about them, but those are actually fine for the bin. They help break down the food, and mites just aren't an issue for a bin. But when you've got a bin as old as this, and it is 154 days, and you've got a lot of mites swarming like that, then that can become an issue because they are competing with the mites. And because this bin is getting long in the tooth, I haven't been feeding as much, so the mites and the worms are kind of competing. So I want to show you something. If you have bread like this and it's full of mites, and there's an area right here full of mites, what you can do if you're wondering if there's worms in there is you can fill a bowl with water like this, and you can put the bread inside. And if you notice, the mites mostly go on top and the worms themselves will sink. Now I see some mites on the bottom too, but you can do this and it's a lot easier to find the worms, and there aren't any worms in here, and kind of separate them out. Now I do this in case there's any worms, and what I do after I've done this is this goes right down the sink. I don't put that bread in the trash or anything, it just goes right down the sink. So that's what we're gonna do. So what I'm gonna do is take the rest of that bread off, and I'm going to take the little area right here that's full of mites, and I'm going to put that in here. So I am sacrificing some castings, but I want to get these mites out. So this isn't necessarily a worm emergency, something that's making the bin fail or anything. And I don't really want to spend money to try and fix this if I don't need to. I just kind of want to use mechanical means. And what I may end up doing is when we harvest this, I may bathe the worms, which is to put them in a lukewarm bath, kind of get the mites off them before I restart this bin. So I think I've got most of the mites that I can. Let me just take a second to make sure there's no worms in here, and we'll be back. So here's kind of what you might see when you do this. Because we put the water in afterwards, it's a little cloudy, but look at the just sheen of mites on the top. That's how you can kind of separate them out. So I'm going to drain this out and get any worms. I don't think there are any in here, but I'm going to go ahead and see if there's any worms in there. So hopefully that took some of the population down. If you want to, you can use those castings in your garden, those kinds of mites. Feed on dead and decaying matter, so they're not the kind that are going to affect your plants, that kind of thing. But what we did last time was we only gave 8 strawberries, and I think that was part of the problem. The worms were pretty hungry, the mites were pretty hungry, so they're kind of fighting over food. I'm also seeing, like right here, a little tiny white worms, and those are pot worms. Another bin critter that's not a problem but can increase when there are issues with your bin, which clearly this little bin is having issues. And I had the same kind of issues last time we ran this bin, about the same time. And that's because this bin starts off tough to keep moisture in, and then the moisture goes well, and then it gets really moist, and that's when the mites kind of increase in population. Now, on this side is where we fed last. We fed those strawberries, and we also put in big bedding because we're getting close to harvest, and we didn't want to put a lot of shreds because we want to just have our castings be able to come up easily. And what we're finding in here is some mites, but also tons of worms. So they are probably enjoying the juices and enjoying kind of the cubby hole nature of it, maybe to add their cocoons. And we have a lot more mites on here too. I'm just gonna hold it still to do a time lapse. So lots of babies, lots of mites, and I know red mites are a kind that can attack worms. I think if that was the case, if these were those kinds of red mites, and there's like 4,000 kinds of mites, we would see them attacking the baby worms on the sides and on the top, that kind of thing. And that's just not happening. I think this is more of just a situation where they're all competing for food. And here's a little worm ball right here inside. So let's keep moving around and seeing if they got to the newspaper. So I know a lot of people have a lot of suggestions for how to get rid of mites. I think DE powder and some other things work. But again, I'm trying to get rid of them on my own by changing the parameters within the bin, which is a little hard in this little tiny worm bin because once it gets moist, it is hard to get it dry again, especially as we get closer to harvest. And I think I may harvest next time just to kind of get the worms out of this situation. And because these castings are looking pretty good, they're still pretty moist, not too bad. They're probably siftable, but I think getting the worms out of this bin and resetting it up will do well for them. And I think this time we probably have more than 600. I thought the carrying capacity was 600, but I'm seeing a lot more worms in here. So let me just kind of mix things up. I'm going to put this stuff to the side because I don't want it to break apart too much. We want to keep it intact, and it was helping us dry out the bin a little bit, and I think it did a good job of that. Let me break this open, see if there's another worm ball in here. A little bit of a worm ball in there. So put this to the side, and then we'll dig in. Wow, this material is looking really good for harvesting, so I think that's what we're going to do. Next feeding, or I'm sorry, after this feeding, we'll let a week go by and then we will harvest. There are just a lot of mites. I didn't even see this many last time, so they had a bit of a population bloom. Let's go ahead and look in this side. I'm not smelling any foul odors. I don't think that there's a big worm die-off or anything like that. So again, no issues, but certainly more mites than I like to see in a bin. And a lot of those little pieces of cardboard are being consumed. We're just seeing a few of these like little pieces of cardboard here, so that is good. We saw quite a bit more last time, and the ones that are in here are ones that I put in just recently in the last 3 feedings or so. So worms are doing good. Here's that ball that we had. So awesome. Okay, and it is feeling a lot more flowy than last time. Last time it was almost kind of muddy. So things are looking good. Those papers did a good job. So I'll put a couple more toilet paper rolls in here, and they should be easy to get out. So I'm gonna add that stuff over to this side. And then let's go ahead and add our other toilet paper rolls and also add our feeding. So here's 2 new fresh ones. We'll just lay them in here, and then we'll put our food right on top of them. So because last time I don't think I had enough food, we're gonna go ahead and put in all fast food. So here is a lettuce stalk and some carrots, but this is a little bit more food than we had in last time. And I'm gonna try my hardest to get in here before 10 days, and we'll go ahead and harvest this bin. Most of this food was frozen before. The only thing that wasn't was this little piece of banana that my son didn't eat. So in it all goes, and we'll put the liquid in there. So this should be a pretty quick feeding for him, but let's go ahead and put on some more amendments. All of this stuff is dry, so I'm not too worried about it. This is my worm chow that I just created, so I'm excited to be giving this to the worm bin for the first time. And I think Gardening with Buchukin had mentioned that worm chow heated up his bins a little bit, so I'm wondering if this adds a little bit of heat. So I'll come in here and check the temperature for next time. And then here's some coffee. So yeah, Rick over there, Gardening Pachukin, does a Worm Wednesday that I love to see his bins. He also does some great gardening stuff, so go ahead and check him out. And that coffee was just another extra food source for him. And here's just a little bit of grit. Certainly this bin has enough grit in for them, but just kind of have it. This is eggshell that has been pulverized in a magic bullet blender. So let's go ahead and bury all this stuff up. And there's some worms right there ready to attack. Here's a banana stem. They eventually get to all of that. But we'll go ahead and add this in. And the worms will eventually get to all of that. And this whole, right now there's a depression here and a hill here, and this whole thing will shrink down by the time we come in here next time. But I am going to be coming in and checking, and I'll probably put some more bread down to try and lure out the mites. But go ahead and put in the comments what you do to decrease the mite population, or if you even think the amount of mites you saw in here is an issue. So I hope you're all doing well. I hope your worm bins are doing well. And happy vermicomposting, everybody. Take care now.